I thought, I believe I read it on Microsoft Watch that it's February. And I believe, isn't that when the developers start getting the returns on their sold applications?
Like they're off, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I don't really think they sold many. I mean, I don't think they actually sold any of the phones to many people. I mean, maybe Ballmer is rallying the troops to basically buy all the applications, and maybe Microsoft is going to like sponsor them to go and download everything just to keep the developers coming. But that's just joking.
Well, I mean, if the applications say that's being sold, some of the main people that are interested in keeping on the platform, if their applications are being sold for £2 or £3, it would certainly make a rather shrewd investment for Microsoft to do that. Because if the developer gets a good return come February, if that's the time when it's going to be released, then that's going to convince them to stay on the platform. And I don't think the developer will care whether real users are buying it or whether it was a Microsoft investment of a couple of 100,000 or whatever.
Yeah, my estimation, they have about. I think it's 90,000 employees now in Microsoft. But this actually includes all. I don't really think it's every single employee. That they obviously have all kinds of people who are not working in technology or something in the company, but they claim to be distributing their phones to every single person who works full time in Microsoft. And what I think is, in this case, it's pretty easy for a company like Microsoft to even, I'm just saying hypothetically, to give coupons to the employees to go around and buy lots of things, which are then being written off by Microsoft, and kind of give some good feeling to the developers. And I think, considering how much they spent on marketing the platform, this is the type of thing which could be a way of passing money to the developers without just saying, well, we pass you money as a reward for you supporting us, but basically to show you, look, you have many sales here, and lots of people use this thing, when obviously it's kind of semi-fake. That's what I kind of would do if I was at Microsoft, if I was trying to cheat on the numbers, which of course I wouldn't. But this is the type of trick they might want to pull. I think they did these types of things before, faking desires, rigging polls. We have all kinds of examples of Microsoft rigging polls against Java or against Linux, where Linux and Java were shown to be increasingly popular. All of a sudden, all the IP addresses for Microsoft would show up and tell the results. So it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be really important to use critical analysis here and to actually look at what was happening and why certain things turn out a certain way, why Microsoft keeps quiet about certain things, why Microsoft is delaying the results in terms of sales of applications until February, when, they could actually give some figures back in December, I think, when they had just about 1,000 applications. But if you ask my opinion, I think they're pretty much over in this area, and they don't exactly know what to do. All they know is just like, oh, patents, sue, or say, oh, you stole from us, or trying to cling on to something.
Well, I mean, I'll end on this, and this is more in reference to the KIN. If users don't know, which I presume everybody does now, because it's pretty common knowledge, but the KIN was the failed Microsoft social networking type phone that lasted 42 days. Have I got that right this time, Roy? 42 days?
Yeah,
42 days before it's withdrawn. And I was talking to this Windows developer, and I said, this is what I put. I'll tell you what I put, and then I'll tell you what he responded back with. But I think before I say what he responded back with, it's pretty typical of the way that I've certainly mentioned, the way Microsoft is able to shift blame. Now, this Windows developer, I don't believe works for Microsoft. I don't believe he's affiliated with Microsoft in any way. I think he's an independent developer, and he's trying to make a living on the Windows Phone 7 platform. But this is what I put to him anyway. I said to him, in respect to more phones than in 2010, what would you say to the original WinMob mobile owners? I was one of them on an MDA mail. What would you say to the KIN owners? Were they better off with an additional Microsoft phone in the market? Now, basically, he'd said that the market was better off with Microsoft phones in there, and it was an extra choice for the customer. And this is what he responded to me. He said, it's called a choice. You walk into a shop, there are 10 devices. Some are great, some are rubbish. The user can choose which one they can have. The KIN was rubbish and did Microsoft no favours, but it was up to the user to buy the phone. And again, this is a very typical thing that we've seen certainly with Microsoft, or certainly I've perceived with Microsoft, where the blame gets pushed onto somebody else. It wasn't Microsoft's phone problem, the KIN was rubbish. It was up to the users not to buy it. So I just thought I'd end on that. And
very careful with the word choice. I don't think we've seen on the previous show. Microsoft loves to use the word choice, and someone's trying to conflate this with open. And when Microsoft says choice, is when you go into a certain debate. This is one of the major spin points, is that well, basically, Microsoft is very happy having monopolies in all sorts of areas, and when you speak about choice, they basically will try to avoid the subject. But when the competition has foothold, things like the mainframes with IBM or things like phones, Microsoft will try to justify its existence and dirty plays and dirty tricks and using of other companies to sue companies like IBM. They'll say, well, we have to promote choice. I say, hold on a second, Microsoft promoting choice? Oh my God, Windows, what the hell about choice? People buy a computer and they have to buy Windows with it. And this is what they always resort to the word choice. And the choice, sometimes the choice is also, that's the other thing, is that sometimes the choice is a very fake one. And that's the example where they try to tell you, well, you don't have to buy Windows. You can buy Windows Starter Edition, or you can buy this edition. It's kind of like saying, well, you can choose between white and vanilla, or vanilla white, something like that. So it's just fake choice. So that's just the choice that you basically can choose two identical things, pretty much.
I mean, I'll make it clear. If anybody's interested, the conversation is actually as a thread on the article that I wrote on this Windows Phone 7 data eating allegation. And I would say that the user that made that comment, like I say, is not, I don't believe is associated with Microsoft in any way. He's quite a nice chap. In fact, he's a very nice chap. We had quite a long discussion about the sort of appeals of each platform and what would make him as a developer go to Windows Phone 7. And to his credit, he's given me a lot fuller responses and a lot more honest responses than a lot of other people who I've seen advocating and championing Windows Phone 7. So hats off to him for that. And I think you'll find the thread quite interesting because he highlights some quite good points as well on the opposing side. So that was that. Roy, have you got some more to throw to us for today, or are we going to close?
We have all sorts of news we haven't covered over the past like 4 days since the last show. I'm not sure. I had a suggestion for one person who thinks we should try and cover all the news and do something at the beginning of the show. But for most listeners, I think it's probably necessary to point this out by now. The way we do the show is we don't actually plan things in advance. We don't actually set out an agenda. And we certainly don't have very concise summaries. They sometimes do news summaries where you have say, 3 minutes of a person just going through a script, which was prepared by people carefully. And I think it would be extremely nice if I actually went through the news and tried to summarize to pick up the important news and to try and lay them out in some ways. We have shows that do that by now. One of them is Linux Log, which is a person I think from Phoenix, Arizona, who's doing that. And I can think of several other shows. I could mention a few by names, but they also provide a similar service, and I think it'll be kind of almost unnecessary to repeat what they have provided so far. And I always try to ensure in anything in this show as well. We both try to ensure we discuss certain topics that aren't discussed somewhere else too much. In my case, personally speaking, I like to talk about things like patents and patent deals, things like the use of copyrights against as means of censorship, things like that, which in Linux sites are usually not covered as much as they should be. Now, if we're talking about news in general, I could give a bit of a discussion now about software patents. I know Tim doesn't feel extremely comfortable with that. He doesn't like the topic too much. But what happens these days, which ought to be at least mentioned, is the CPTN situation with Novell's patents. For those who don't know, there were conflicting reports or complementary reports, as it turns out later. Microsoft is trying to buy almost 1,000 patents, unnamed patents, not publicly known patents from Novell. Microsoft has set up I think they call it a consortium or something of certain companies that they tried to put there. You weren't supposed to know which companies these were, but it kind of leaked out. And they tried to get hold of Novell's patents to add and increase the level of so-called intellectual property they have, including some which has to do apparently with Unix, and what's applicable to Unix might be applicable to Linux as well. And what